The President. Earlier on, this council was aborted for lack of a quorum. In accordance with ROP Rule 76 and 14.6, I resume the Council to deal with outstanding business of the Council. I'll resume the second reading debate on the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Amendment Bill 2019. Mr. Andrew Wen. Thank you, President. Now, President, I beg you to be forbearing. I will have to comment on the background of the bill because the amendments have their functions and social objectives. So I cannot help commenting on the background of the bill, but I promise to be brief. I will explain why members of the public are so furious about the MPF system and whether the proposed amendments can work. Many people have criticized severely the MPF system and is very unpopular among the community. And the public at large feel that the system is useless in giving them retirement protection. They ask for, most of all, they hate the offsetting arrangement. However, this is not the objective of the bill. Members of the public feel that their retirement protection is being eroded by the administration fees, not to mention the offsetting arrangements. The fees used to be higher than they are now. So now, according to the administration, the bill plans to tackle this problem, and I will give you my views as to whether this is going to work. Now, whether it be the MPF authority or the administration, they are not monitoring the trustees properly. There's no reason why the administration and management fees are so high. They should have put a cap to that long time ago. Now, the bill seeks to, well, as I said, address to a certain extent aspirations of the community. The bill will empower the MPF authority to establish a wholly owned subsidiary, that is the eMPF platform company. The purpose is to provide a common integrated electronic platform to facilitate the standardization, streamlining, and automation of MPF scheme administration processes. It would want to achieve standardization so as to lower the administration's fees. Now, for a paper submitted to the FA panel in May, among the 30 million MPF administration transactions per year, over 65% of them are paper-based. So it appears that there is an urgent need for this system. There are about 4 million scheme members with 10,000 accounts administered by 14 trustees, either internally or through third-party administrators, involving 12 scheme administration platforms with different scheme administration process of varying standards. That is the reason why the administrative costs are so high. So the 12 scheme administration platforms will be unified under the eMPF platform. It seems that the administrative cost can be lowered, and then this will digitalize the management of funds. According to the MPFA website, as of December 2019, about 40 to 50% of them, of the employers, are dealing with the administration of schemes online, including the submission of information and making contributions. Compared to 2017, when they were only 20 to 30%, it was really a marked improvement. So it seems that the proposal is well justified. However, there are still a lot of question marks in the system. They're not as perfect as they seem. Now, I would like to raise a few points so that even with the passage of the bill, the government should continue to work on these areas. First, the offsetting arrangement for the MPF scheme, the bill has yet to be introduced to this council. If the bill cannot be passed, i.e. the offsetting arrangement cannot be abolished, or should there be changes? As we all know, this government may all of a sudden, out of the blue, come up with new ideas or new suggestions from the business sector. And at the end of the day, the full portability of MPF benefits may not be achievable. At least there is cause for concern in this area. The second issue is whether the MPF platform can really, as proposed in the bill, be able to lower the administrative fees. The MPFA system has been put in place for a long time. The net asset value has increased from $30 billion to $870 billion in 2020. We've seen a threefold increase. However, for the cost, the reduction is from 1.84% to 1.45%, and the reduction is not really proportional to the increase in the amount of asset. Now, different trustees are required to offer an investment option where the fee is capped at 0.75% under the default investment strategy, hoping that using market forces, the cost can be lowered. But if we compare with the tracking fund, the management cost has been around 0.07 to 0.1% in recent years. So the administrative fees for MPF schemes are on the high side. Now, if we compare MPF schemes and the trackers fund, the former has fallen behind tracking fund. The annualized return of the latter has been 7.5%, almost a threefold increase in the total value over the period. Whereas for MPF systems, it's just around 4.1% annualized, and then about 40% for the whole period. Of course, there are different funds in the system with different rates of return for you to choose from. I only just gave you the current average. If securities fund was chosen, the overall or average return would be 5% during the past 10 years. While it has not done better than tracking fund, it was a bit better than inflation. So I think the employees should be thankful. Mr. Andrew Wen, please come back to the bill. Well, I'm talking about the rate of return of MPF funds. However, this is not the subject of the bill. I'm done with this topic very soon, so allow me a few more minutes. However, if an employee has purchased a currency fund or conservation fund, then the return will only be about 1%. Now, taking into account inflation, then in fact, these employees have suffered losses. And you have to bear in mind there's been the offsetting arrangement, so asset increase hasn't been able to beat inflation. So the conclusion is, while the bill intends to lower the scheme administrative fees, I think they are only tackling the tip of the iceberg. It isn't able to tackle all the problems associated with the MPF system. I understand that the bill would only focus on an aspect of the system, but I hope that the MPF authority and administration can address the concerns I just outlined. While we cannot have a perfect solution now, I hope they understand that millions of employees' benefit are at stake. And the value-added aspect of the funds is not too desirable, and I have great doubts as to whether this eMPF platform can improve the situation. Having said so, I hope that they can make continuous improvements so that we can have a better retirement protection for our employees. Thank you.
Mr. Shukajan. President, I'll be speaking on the MPF Scheme Amendment Bill. The bill provides for the amendment of the MPF SO Cap 485. There are three main points. The MPFA will set up a wholly owned subsidiary. Second, to amend the ARF annual registration fee level payable to the MPFA. Third, to prohibit passing on the cost of ARF to scheme members. President, I'm sure a lot of members have said this. The MPF, its reputation is in tatters, and people are crying foul. And people are labeling the MPF as a forced contribution fund. This is also a rapist fund. I mean, that people are calling names. People don't hate something for nothing. People don't label the MPF for nothing. At the end of the day, this is a privately run fund. It offers a very low return rate for the underprivileged, for the disadvantaged. There is very little in the way of rewards, and the employers and the intermediaries stand to gain a lot from that. The amendment to the ordinance is to deal with the blunders that the government created over the years. The government is trying to apply a band-aid kind of approach to deal with the problems of its own making. This is piecemeal way of dealing with the problem. So the whole amendment is wholly disappointing. The purpose of the MPF is to help people save up for retirement. Only 74% of the self-employed have registered themselves with the MPF scheme. There are many employers who are taking advantage of legal loophole and don't make the contribution. Those above 65 will be exempted from any contribution. All these problems have been building up, and the amendment hasn't really touched on these problems. And these are problems under the MPF. The government seem to pretend they don't exist. Also, the offsetting arrangement has been troubling the workers for so long. The government's promises to remove the offsetting has not been materialized. The secretary said that the legislating process will be completed in 2021. It will be implemented in 2023-24. The offsetting arrangement over the years has leaked the benefits of the workers. Mr. Xu, will you come back to the subject? Understood. Let me say a few more words on this. The government's spending 25 years to deal with these problems. We haven't got any robust retirement protection scheme. This is a sad day for Hong Kong. This is a sad day created by the powers that be. President, the retirement protection scheme is not just about the MPF. Before the handover, the colonial government tried to set up the central problem. But please come back to the subject, Mr. Xu. Thank you for the reminder. This time, the government is amending the MPF ordinance, and there are two studies conducted. In 2012, the study showed that the MPF fees in Hong Kong are higher than that in Australia, Chile, and Mexico. There are three reasons for that, in my view. First, the paper-based administrative work is on the high side. there are 30,000 transactions, 65% of them are paper-based, and also with physical check. Second, there's a lack of cooperation in the trade. They cannot resolve the problems faced by the trade, and they cannot share the infrastructural costs. Third, there is a lack of competition, and the service providers are trying to maintain their profits, and there is no pressure to bring down the price. The first report confirmed the necessity for the central e-platform. The second study confirmed that it should be run by a non-profit making organization. It should deal with all the administrative procedures. According to the government, the e-MPF platform is a common platform, and the administrative procedures will be streamlined, standardized, and automated. And all the MPF trustees can be assisted to fulfill the administrative responsibilities. And there will be a common standard. All the data and payment instructions can be issued from the platform to the relevant people. And there will be a cross-sectoral interface that will be linked with the trustees, the employers, and the members can take advantage of this interface to gain access to the platform. There will be a data bank which will store all the necessary data. The two consultancy report explain the fact that the government has ignored all the problems that have been building up, and that explains the lack of efficiency and lack of coordination and all the rest of the problems. According to the MPF's brief, there are 4.6 million scheme members, and according to the paper submitted to the LegCo, there are 30 million transactions, and there are 100,000 transactions that are paper-based per day. The government paper shows that the administrative work is fragmented, and there is a lot of administrative procedures, and there's an increase in the number of scheme accounts, and the paper-based transactions are so high, and this is the reason why the fees are so high. According to the consultancy report commissioned by the MPFA, the government is developing the platform with taxpayers' dollars. The government keeps saying that we are living in a free market in this financial center. Why is it that transaction is taking place using the low-end system? The government keeps saying that in a free market we pride ourselves on efficiency. Why do we allow the system, which has been operating for 20 years, to be like this? The consultancy hasn't proposed any recommendation, but it highlights all the problems. The consultancy says there is a lack of coordination, and they cannot resolve collectively the problems facing the entire trade, and they do not share out the fundamental costs. And this is the hands-off approach adopted by the government, and this is the result that is caused by the government. It shows that the free market the government touted is not everything. Here, according to the amendment, there will be a wholly owned subsidiary, and the ARF level will be adjusted. Will the eMPF platform reduce the burden and plug the loopholes? The crux lies with the fact that the digital take-up rate is high enough. The digital take-up rate leaves so much to be desired. For the small and medium-sized enterprises, the take-up rate is so low, and there is a lack of incentive for people to take up the digital platform. Whether the eMPF platform will change the administrative way of doing things, and this is of concern to us. About 20 years ago, the government launched the MPF. I think the government is owing a lot to the people of Hong Kong. This eMPF platform is really tinker around the edges. This may increase the role of the MPFA, and this will rationalize the infrastructure in the market, but it cannot change, it cannot alter people's perception about the MPF. It doesn't really do anything to help us buttress the benefits of the grassroots people. This tinkering around the edges will not pacify people's grievances. The MPF has been around for 20 years. Retirement protection has been discussed for 50 years. And there has been a lot of toing and throwing. There has been a lot of pledges from the government, but nothing much has come out of it. The government fails to give the public a satisfactory reply. The same can be said about the MPF. The same can be said about the universal retirement protection. The same can be said about a lot of measures on the part of the government. How much longer is the government going to drag its feet? President, when it comes to the government, we are talking about politics. We are talking about misery. We're talking about tough lives on the part of the public. When the term is nearing the end, I hope that you will remember my words. Thank you.
Dr. Fernando Cheung, President, it seems that we don't have a quorum.
張超雄議員。
President, I see that Mr. Chen Kin-po has returned. I must address him in response. After Kwang Chun-yu spoke, he said loudly that Mr. Kwang was being deceptive. He said that many things were said in deception of the public, so that people thought that the MPF was doing very well with high annual return. The figure was 4.8%. In fact, it was 4.1%. The MPF is something nobody likes. Charges are high, returns are low, everyone knows that. Well, Mr. Chen said the MPF yields a high return. Over the past 20 years, its annual return was 4.1%. But if you look at the HKMA's portfolio for the government, the investment portfolio consists of two parts. For one part, 2007 to last year, the average return 6.1%. Long-term portfolio, average return 13.5%. Shame upon the MPF. The MPF is utterly powerless. It's a hoax. My friend, Professor Lam Bunlei, revealed that long ago. Now, everybody is angry at MPF. Everyone is forced to contribute to the MPF, even if you make just a few $1,000s a month, and you don't know when you will get your money back. When you lose on the MPF, you can lose a lot. For the past few months, there was a drop of 19.6%. Everyone loses on average over $37,000. You call that good return? For the 2019, for this bill, it's about two things. First, there will be a centralized MPF platform. Secondly, there will be an annual registration fee. Now I will address both matters. Now this eMPF centralized platform will become a wholly owned subsidiary company of the MPFA. It will be a so-called electronic platform. It's supposed to help save paper, streamline work procedures. A lot of work procedures will be centralized and electronic, so the trustees' management fees stand a chance of being lowered. This platform, it says, will be operated on non-profit basis, so the public can be confident, and the management will be efficient, the structure will be simplified, the MPFA will own it as a wholly owned subsidiary, so everything is consistent. So there would be a chance for reduction of management fee. According to its chairperson, Mr. Wong Yok-ka, it says that it will save 70 million pieces of paper. It will save the cutting of 8,000 trees. So the platform is supposed to be very important. Now the portability. Now we have a so-called semi-portable portability right now. So full portability would be a reality in the sense that the offset of the MPFA would be a possibility as well. Now everyone is angry at the MPF scheme. Carrie Lam said that this is one of the 3 pillars, the MPFA, the link rate, and so on. All 3, they were created by the government. They were demons created by the government. And now you tell us that the eMPF platform will help people? How? The design was a mistake, was an error. We have over 2 million employees in Hong Kong, but there are over 10 million of these accounts. And there are over 240,000 accounts which have incomplete information. The sums involved, $440 million. So the persons are not even aware that they have these accounts. So the money stays indefinitely in those accounts. So the trustees will take them all. So the design is a mistake from the start. And the chairperson, Mr. Wong, said in his blog that the MPFA had gone after the sums for the public, and it says that a lady reported to the MPFA that she wasn't familiar with the law, the husband's salary records are incomplete, and she has to look after 4 children, and the husband was ill and there's no income, and eventually he was able to recover for her the $60,000 of benefits that were owed him. Now, this is a mistake that they created. There are so many different accounts for the same person, and then the information is incomplete. So it's a whole mess. Now you say that you would help put things right. Now the eMPF platform, will it resolve that problem? Will the system of accounts be wholly improved as a whole? Now, people don't believe in your claims, and you said that in the past you haven't collected the fees, and that's our second method in this bill. And so you have an annual registration fee, and it's going to be 0.03%. Doesn't seem a lot, but the total accumulated MPF benefits are about 1 trillion. So 0.3%, that's $300 million a year. So is the MPFA operating effectively over the years? Now, you rely on the capital grants accorded to you in 1998, and you rely on its investment returns. And now after 20 years, you have only $2.58 billion left. You have lost half of it. That's a failure in your investment. The chief executive of the MPFA served the one who worked longest in that post, 18 years, Mrs. Chen, when she retired in 2018, her annual salary was $6.48 million, and her husband, Chen Dangnam, he earns over $10 million a year. So you're now taking the money from the trustees, so in fact the trustees will get the money from the employees, and these guys earn millions of dollars a year. Now the chairman of the Federal Reserve earns only between $1 to $2 million a year. That's the most influential person in the financial world, in the whole world. And she made 3 times that. This is a robbery of the public. You rent the most luxurious office in IFC 1. And now the taxpayers are paying for it all. You've lost half of the capital grant, and now you are trying to get more money from the public. Now if you have operated properly, now you supervise the trustees. What kind of financial institution are you? The whole design is wrong. It's now a whole mess, a hornet's nest of problems. You create the MPFA to resolve these problems, and you fail to do that. You employ a so-called independent consultant, but you never review your own operations. You only review the administration fees of the trustees. Everyone knows they are totally unreasonable. It used to be 4 to 5%, and now it's 1 to 2%. $1 trillion of investment, and you let them collect 1 to 2%. Now, so that's huge compared with the tracker fund. So the return is 1/3 of that, and so as Webb said, Mr. Webb said, this is a disgrace. And now you 0.03% from us, and you collect hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So it's a mess. How much money has the MPFA lost per year? Almost 20 years. You lose money every year. How can you operate like that? And your employees, your chief executives, was anyone held responsible? Did anyone has his salary reduced? Now, the administrative officers, they leave the government, and then they go to the MPFA. Mrs. Chen was an administrative officer, and similarly, another former chief secretary. Now, the MPFA, the MPF system should be removed. Now this amendment bill is just a small piece of small attempt to improve things. Now, Chen Kim-paul was making wild claims. He praised the MPF. he should ask the man on the street, see if anyone is in support of the MPF. Now, they would utter curses at the MPF.
Just now, Chen Yu talk about the MPF fund. When you talk to the MPF scheme managers, well, they're truly big fat cats. The amount they charged is on almost billions of dollars, whether the returns are good, positive or negative. Well, only benefiting the insurance companies, the banks, the investment managers, and the management in MPF 8 get paid over $6 million a year. For all other workers, if you look forward to MPF as your retirement protection, forget about it. By the time of your retirement, the money MPF interest benefits were not able to buy you a piece of fruit. Do you remember Mr. Chen Zhuo who talked about this financial collapse when the colonial government proposed setting up a MPF offering 2,300, and after the handover, our government should improve. Instead, you're still criticizing the colonial administration as cruel, while the MPF of were created by the colonial area officials. Well, in the UK, the pension is to offer protection for the elderly. Look at what happened in Hong Kong today. The whole society have paid a huge price for the flawed policies. Well, this bill would charge 0.03% of the net asset values of the MPF schemes. That's about over $263 million a year. Back in 2003, we have appointed Professor Chow to conduct 2 rounds of consultation on retirement protection. That for the elderly pension does not mean tested. It's the most single effective means that would also financially sustainable. And the 2040 proposal, in 2064, Dr. Kwok, please return to. I just want to make a comparison. There will be $160 billion of surplus. Well, back then they claimed only $100 billion of seeding capital is required, and without requiring extra injection, other than setting up an extra tax of 1.95%. Please return to this debate. I am on way. Well, now that we have over $290 billion, and due to the COVID-19 and all of the anti-extradition treaty, while the original proposal would cost 1/3 of this 0.03% of the NAV as the management fees. For example, the exchange traded funds, the charge is at about 0.3%, and yet the returns are higher than the MPF many times more. But you put the money on the ETF or the tracker HK, you could have beaten the MPF scheme, because I call this later a scam. Why the government doing this? It had to do with the political system. Since the insurance sector, the financial service sector, and also the banking sector are made up of the functional constituencies which we elect the chief executive. Well, these are the big masters. The insurance company, the banks, the financials, that is all very cozy, well, and they would reaping windfalls. So how will you sacrifice their interests? Because this MPF will last forever. While trying to putting on a show on how to use Dr. K. My final warning to you. I'm touching on the essential platform. What I'm talking about how the essential platform will help the MPF. Forget about it. As of this 0.03% would only add to the burden of the employees. Well, also employers as well. Well, they're probably all right because the money is paid either way. Well, I suppose they wouldn't care whether it's really help the employees with their protections, not their concern. And so long there are jobs available to be fine. Well, on this, what's the point of this eMPF centralized platform? How many of the older workers you intend to help? Well, on the service, it's using a electronic platform, but we all know a lot of the eMPF, especially the cleaners, the dishwashers, the cashiers, and those in property management, a lot of them are probably not computer literate. Well, for this claim of paperless, well, if you can't print a piece of paper, they will get scammed easily. Most of my investment return, they will ask you to check online. It's just a list of English sentences and digits. So what they can really see? Well, as somebody will pocket money, well, regardless of performance, they'll make money anywhere. Of this wholly owned subsidiary, this baby at MPFA will create a lot of well-paid positions, and probably this post will be taken by the retired civil servants. That will have to Ref Yao Hui and also with the Mr. Anna Chan. And you see, a lot of the public bodies spurned out of government were on the surface. They're not civil servants positions, but actually without the rules, but actually they got paid triple. Well, secretary, it could be your turn. Well, after your retirement, well, this annual pay of 6 or 7 million years as a salary before you, but maybe your family is rich anyway. Well, are this MPF contributions reasonable? On the surface, 0.03% means a small change. Well, we talk about hundreds of billions of dollars, and then it will continue to contribute in eternity, while the grassroots and the workers will continue to contribute month after month. Well, and all the money will funnel into this central platform. Well, some are in for a feast, and the MPFA well-paid management, well, they're public officers in a sense. Well, in the 80s or 90s, the government created a lot of these public bodies. For example, the HKMA, the Airport Authority, and Trade Development Council, the Hospital Authority. A lot of these public bodies and no longer linked to the civil service pay structure, and there are a lot of those positions that are paid with $6 to $10 million a year. That simply departed from the intent of the MPFA. Well, remember the grand promises made? Remember the 3 pillars of retirement? And MPF will be one together with the other 2, or your own savings, or the family contribution and your own savings. You're able to enjoy a enriched retirement. Just look at the number, especially the elderly poverty rate kept rising. Well, the government is good at fudging the numbers. For example, those in public housing, well, the other income and classify them as non-financial welfare, which push up the curve. Well, the government is quite intelligent. If you can't really aim, then they will deploy underhand tactics or tweak the formula to push up their combined income, for example, or housing or non-financial benefits would paint a pretty good picture. Government that truly serve its people resorted to this numbers fudging. Is that really necessary? Well, since 1966, when Hong Kong first discussed retirement protection, 54 years on, well, the year 2020 is the 20th year of the launch of MPF. Well, we can say there were grumblings or deafening. A lot of the money didn't really get to the grassroots and to poor workers. They spent their lifetime contributing to society. When at time for the retirement, what they got in return probably more than 1/3. Well, under more recent regime, the contributions could have multiplied. Well, from 1966, for the talk of universal retirement protection, and for 2016, well, in 2013, the government appointed Professor Chow Wing-sun to conduct a study, and for 2016, this academic proposal, and to the present. Well, why wouldn't hear anybody else speak up? Because people have given up. The government is beyond help. Before Carrie Lam became CE, whatever she said had got rubbed out. Well, she and Lushi Kwong avoid meeting the pressure groups and treat them as invisible. As of today, the entire Hong Kong government have gone the unspeakable. They can't even offer the most basic protection or safety. That is quite laughable. As if we're living in a parallel universe. When we're talking about how the MPF could help on the twilight years, we can see the draconian law. I'll see a lot of the appalling governances. And people's worry about the future, whether it's young and old. By comparison, the MPF seemed less significant, but there are a lot of people must stay in Hong Kong and work to make ends meet. They could not leave this town, no matter how much they have fallen. This administration, since the unification claiming it is a strong administration, for example, Ms. Carrie Lam, who claimed to serve 40 years in the government, and together with her political appointed team and also with the Secretary Law Chi Kwong and the social welfare professor, what can you see? You can't see a future or any prospects. And this EPF platform proposal only add to the administrative burden of the MPF. Well, the others fund managers, banks of insurance company had their plate full, and the management at the MPFA decided to create another entity to create a dozen or more sort of $1 million paid jobs. Well, that's a lot of money on the table. Well, back in 1995, when the MPF ordinance passed, so 25 years on, well, had become the holy, a huge feast for those stakeholders. Each time when we kind of have the proposals for redistribute the wealth in the society to help those in the grassroots. Well, I wouldn't say that emerge from poverty. So after they pass their prime, hopefully we can offer them for a peaceful retirement. Well, after 65, there are a lot of those still working cleaners and dishwashers and security guards. Most recently, I see an 80-year-old outsourced worker from FPHD. Well, you still have to sweep the street at 80 years old. Well, I'm asking why couldn't they enjoy the retirement? The answer is simple. How could they? If it doesn't work, how could they afford to feed himself and his wife and his children will not support him. This is a man-eating world. While the biggest piece, I would say, for the fund managers, the MPF, and also the subsidiary with plenty of million-dollar paying jobs. This is a cannibalistic society. The most unspeakable is administration. The government is supposed to play the role of the gatekeeper and protect the poorest. As of today, under the distort political system, they simply protect the richest. Only when the biggest fat get happy that they will able to last power.
唔該。
Dr. Chen Chongtai. This is the second to final day of the current session of LegCo. We are discussing the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Amendment Bill 2019. Through legislative amendment, a wholly owned subsidiary by the MPFA would be established to operate the new eMPF platform. And there are several objectives to this platform, including streamlining certain administration processes, enhancing the operational efficiency of trustees and MPF schemes. This involves streamlining manpower, through automation. Manpower can be streamlined and time and cost can also be saved. Without such platform, if you are to switch funds within schemes, then you have to talk to the fund manager. The eMPF platform is similar to e-banking platforms. You can log in anytime to obtain relevant information. The trends of different portfolios. Let's say you can switch to a North American portfolio, or you can switch to a Greater Bay Area portfolio if you so wish. For fund companies, they can save administrative fees or costs. For users who choose different MPF schemes, they would enjoy greater flexibility in allocating their funds. What I just said now is the official side of things, and now I would express my views. The MPF regime is often discussed when we talk about public policy. Initial problems led to more and more errors and problems. And MPF is a classic case of problems arising from policy. We are coming to the end of the LegCo term. This is a social policy that involves a lot of people, and we are rather dismayed that this would be the final item to be dealt with, because such discussions are no longer meaningful. After the transfer of sovereignty, everyone had a vision, but in light of population aging and declining birth rates, it's about how we can ensure retirement protection as citizens of the society. Mr. Lau Jin-shek talked about a central compensation fund, or rather, like Dr. Fernando Chung said, would there be a collective fund that would amount to universal retirement protection? The discussion was whether such a system would be based on the individual. Now we are at the year 2020. Things are no longer the same as 2012, which was a LegCo election year. The theme was to abolish MPF, but the downfalls of the MPF still persist today. In the coming LegCo elections, if you talk about abolishing MPF, voters would find you delusional because the real theme now is the national security law. So in terms of this electronic platform, does Hong Kong still have a vision? Do we still need a retirement protection system in Hong Kong? Secretary, the MPF system is based on a stable society and economy that is sustainable. If you tell employees that with the electronic platform in place, the administration fees can come down by 3%, well, they wouldn't care because they could be fired next week. This is not about the poor economy or politics. Well, but a lot of people would wake up to find that their companies have decided to leave. We have more than 1,300 headquarters of U.S. multinationals in Hong Kong. They might leave anytime. And now we are discussing the eMPF platform from a public administration perspective. Like many members pointed out already, we are still uncertain whether administration fees can be reduced. The MPFA is establishing a wholly owned subsidiary. How much reduction in fees could be achieved? Do you have specific targets or promises for employees? There could be slight reductions, but the extent is still unknown. President, for MPF fund managers, very often they rely on gut feeling or data in concluding that the North American portfolios might still be popular in the second half of the year, but since the US companies will leave, you should opt for the Greater Bay Area portfolio. That is the value of fund managers. They would sell you the information and they would advise you on how you can rejuggle your portfolio to achieve better returns. But I don't trust the MPF platform because I don't trust the government. If the information about or data about portfolios are all available on the system, then but all your money would be eroded if I look to boost the market, so to speak. The platform might be convenient for users, but we are talking about millions of employees in Hong Kong. Would you not have data, or would you not keep data on fund switches and fund allocations? If such data is available or saved in the system, would there be any manipulation for the Hong Kong exchange? Well, I might have digressed, but the point is there is no information transparency in Hong Kong. Public bodies such as the MTR Corporation are corrupt. So I have great doubts how oversight is provided on these public bodies. How many such bodies are there in Hong Kong? For the MPFA, what wages are the staff earning? In the past 20 years, the SAR government should have shouldered a responsibility, but through outsourcing services, they are forming public bodies. Think about the Airport Authority, MTR Corporation, Urban Renewal Authority, the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority. There are numerous public bodies in which their work is unknown. And let's not talk about the science park. Please come back to the debate. The key is there's no way for us to monitor this centralized platform and how you're going to use the information collected. If you simply want to provide convenience to users on enrollment, etc., none of the activities would be recorded. Then that would be about faith. Unfortunately, I have no faith in the government. Most Hong Kongers are only interested in one question. They work in Hong Kong, but they wonder whether they can see the future or 2047. So if the economy is in decline, can they withdraw the benefits and reopen an account later? Or perhaps they would decide to leave, and one day maybe China will become a world superpower and people would want to come back. That might be the case. Hong Kong people have no vision on the retirement protection system. Given the social instability, well, from a public administration perspective, I would only think about cost and effectiveness. But as a social policy, it's just that I do not trust the SAR government. The public bodies, including the MTR Corporation, lacked any oversight. Even though the platform might provide greater convenience, while the data collected might be manipulated. There's no way for us to tell. Thank you.
主席，
President, today we are discussing the MPF schemes. Amendment Bill 2019 is to usher in the eMPF platform. This is to enable the MPFA to set up a wholly owned subsidiary to operate the centralized platform so that the MPF schemes operate more efficiently. This is the objective of the bill. This is to standardize work procedures, to automate the procedures, and the administrative fee is 0.03%. From the perspective of social development, you need more digitalization, the more increased use of technology to deal with this matter, which has to do with the retirement of the members of the public to manage their assets. Now, this is a proper direction. Now, I worked as an employee for decades. I bought MPF. I knew university professors and administrative staff. They know little about the operation of the MPFA. And then when they retired, they phoned the personnel department to ask how much money I have. And a couple of years ago, I tried out this system. And you can answer me later. When you introduce this platform, will you let the users monitor more easily the state of their assets? Am I in low risk or high risk? Now, if you phone to inquire, you phone several times, and it's very bothersome. And if you are busy doing your work, then you give up phoning up. So most of my colleagues, well, only by the day they retire, would they know how much money they have. Now, for public organizations, the universities are the better ones, so they get more. The employees there get more when they retire compared to some others. But the returns are definitely not very good compared with what you can do if I do my own investment. I read their monthly statements. It's very cluttered. Now, if you ask the ordinary employees, they can't retire on the basis of those returns. If you want to improve the mechanism, I would support it. But I have a request. You have to let the users, those who are totally unfamiliar with financial matters, you should let them take a look and know what is their financial picture. Now, we have criticized the MPF schemes for so long, and then we have this portability arrangement. It's called the scheme for lazy people because people don't have time to look after their own investments. So you reduce the management fee to average 1.4%. But if you look at Chile, US, 401k, Taiwan, their management fee was 0.5 to 0.9%. So we still think that the administrative fee is too high. And even in the 70s to 80s, Hong Kong was discussing whether we should do what Singapore did. Their central provident fund system, was it worth copying? And then we decided that we will let private companies become trustees of these funds. And then we are again facing this discussion. The baby boomers before too long will become retired. These people are very energetic, but they will still need to consider what they face when they retire. So should we reconsider letting the government do the management so as to reduce the management fee? Now, in the 08-09 financial tsunami, we learned that our assets dropped by 26%. And now we have the US-China trade war, new coronavirus epidemic. So many employees are worried. Priscilla Leung, please return to the subject. I will try to. Now, so this kind of worry and uncertainty hangs over the head of all employees. Now, you try to implement this system, you try to standardize, to streamline, to automate. Now, for users, as I said, now I don't call it a scheme for lazy people. It's for to be people too busy to deal with their own financial matters. Very often we need practical advice. This has nothing to do with politics. Just now, some members strayed to political issues, even to the 24-47. I don't think that's necessary. We don't need to relate it to politics. But you should help the employees. Now, on the Central Provident Fund matter, I get a lot of feedback. People don't trust the government. They fear that the government might lose all their money. Now, this didn't happen several years ago. So people are worried whether the government will do a proper job managing the funds. They are worried about that too. The MPF scheme has operated almost 20 years, $170 billion in total of assets. Now, some people tell me that the government may not do a good job, but if you just let the private companies do the management, people are unhappy. They take away people's savings through the management fees. Many people are upset when people approach 60. They look at the assets picture. They then start blaming the government, but they used to be supporters of the government. So I hope that the secretary, now you are new in your job, I hope you would seriously consider this matter. I can't give a proper answer to the public. Will the government do a better job? I don't know. If we remove the system, can we come up with a replacement right away? I'm also an employee. I think we are not lazy. We are too busy, too hardworking. We cannot monitor the performance of our own mandatory provident funds. So the government should work harder. Now, you collect 0.03% for the wholly owned subsidiary. Now, I hope the secretary should give us an answer. How do you come up with a more responsible solution?
Members would like to speak. Mr. Potter, would you like to speak? Thank you, President. Well, just now, as heard from the previous two members, it seems that as if the MPF may get abolished, so the 35+ majority may become a reality. Well, since over 22 decades, when I first went for electrical, I went against the MPF. Just now, Dr. Cheng said, well, what MPF if you lost your job? Well, allow 30 seconds to refute him. Of all this money to spend this employment support scheme, just receive information. For example, the Hong Kong Sanatorium received 86 million, and Cathay Pacific 680 million. I don't know what do we have to do this. I keep stressing that the MPF for a lifeline. Well, on the 5 major demands, the government would contribute the MPF for 6 months and also allow them to withdraw 6 months worth of MPF. Okay, not touch on that because I know that you would not allow to touch on that. Now back to the MPF and this bill. Well, for fairness sake, back in 2017, in Carrie Lam's first policy address, she hoped to improve the MPF to make it more efficient in the administration and cut the expenses. First, and how will we take forward the EMPF by setting up a subsidiary company? Well, we find with that to amend the legislation. I notice as 42B mentioned that there are no civil liability. Why reaching this? Looking at the bill itself, there's already an existing provision to ensure that the MPFA and the delegated officers and organizations do not have this liability. Just for extra precaution to ensure the newly owned company will enjoy this exemption. Well, with so much data as at stake, what we had to do with preventing hacker attacks. We heard some global banks suffered from data hacks and suffered financial losses. Would that be one consideration? We need to devote more effort on this. Dr. Cheng worried that people really don't trust the government and the data. Well, maybe that's why they will not take part in the primary. I'll leave him to answer the question. So how strong our anti-hacking capability? If we convert this liability exemption to EMPF, would you simply foregoing accountability? First, we'll talk about the savings to achieve. In 2018, we have allocated 4 billion, and for the budget, we also altogether we've spent over 4 billion on this EMPF. And how much money do you save? Well, it's estimated you can save over $100 billion. Well, to manage this EMPF, well, to over 0.04 to 0.08% as over administrative costs. For where the other 99.9% of the administration go, instead all meant to the payrolls or commission. So where did the money go? Well, on maximum you can achieve savings of 0.4 to 0.8%. Well, of course, saving is vital, but on the overall scheme of things, of all this bells and whistles, how much savings are really achieved? I just want to make sure I get the numbers right. Otherwise, if just saving all 0.4 to 0.8% of the overall administrative costs, it probably doesn't make economic sense. And it's also built on a few factors. You claim that's a very tiny savings, and also the take-up rate. Well, on the $10,000 cash handout scheme, even banks have been cooperative. allow for online application. Plenty of the public who chose to line up to get a pay form, and also they had to wait longer to get the money because it's a low digital ticket rate, especially on our work class and the elderly not familiar with the e-platform. Not only they're not literate in it, for the smaller trustees, they're probably not too digital. If the take-up rate is low, you're not really making any savings either, even though you have made the investment. So I want to hear the secretary about this. And finally, we need also tender for the eMPF system architecture. If we're only able to save 0.4 to 0.8%, well, it probably amount much at the end of the day. And also, the administrative costs. A lot of my colleagues have touched on that. I'm not going to elaborate too much. And now I noticed Mr. Alvin Young mentioned that why can't we achieve the truly user pay instead of waiting for 5 more years? Or the 5 years? I still have to subsidize to 6 years before considering how do we increase at the current rate of 0.03% when I get to 0.05%, because the 0.05% would be the current cost level. Well, we probably got any answers on that. On the 2 decades on, we only start charging now. Sometimes I feel embarrassed. Well, a lot of my colleagues from the opposing camp actually get a point, even though they might have a bad attitude or probably have a half-baked understanding. On the attitude of MPF are quite close to me. Why not just abolish this MPF? I would like to thank them. My attitude is this: any way to let you incremental improvement, rather to keep the system instead of being mutually destructive. Well, Mr. Project asked me, why just abolish it and just let it over with, and probably they fully exhausted by 2024-25. We can just defund them. Well, maybe this is my life philosophy. I hope to achieve a stable incremental improvements. Thus, I tend to accept such changes, but a lot of questions, so I hope the Secretary can respond of questions. For example, why can't you just set the charge at the proposed levels? Why offer more subsidy? A lot of sectors like the travel industry, they actually need to pay a lot of fees and charges to pay for their insurance premiums and other government charges. While Mr. Lang will support the MPF, I believe a lot of his customers, a lot in his profession are benefiting from the MPF. Also said, well, the trustees have a lot of money and why we have to subsidize them. I think it's high time we should consider whether we are coddling. I wouldn't describe it as vampires. Well, they have made a lot of money in 2 decades on. The government have subsidized a lot. Why would he have to continue with this subsidy? Well, I'm not going to talk too much. Well, and February 21st on 2019, I have a debate with Mr. Chen Kin-po with a motion by Mr. Dr. Junius Ho to revitalize MPF. While the Chen Kin-po have criticized me for numerical inaccuracies or misleading the public. Well, he has strong word that there's too many con men in this council. I hope I'm not one of those. Well, I don't con anyone. I just want to deliver the numbers to you. A lot of my colleagues have mentioned the shortcomings. Well, before the deputy stopped me, I just want to say that, well, compare tracker fund to MPF on the fund 2 decades on. For the MPF and charges on average 1.52%, and the tracker fund is 0.09%. There's a 16 times difference. And the return on investment, the MPF for 20 years about 4.1%, and no interest. And the tracker fund, 20 years on, how much would you make? 250 times plus interest, 61 times. The tracker fund have beaten the investment fund by 61 times, while pay 16, while the charge is only 1/16. Well, I understand that as a member of the function constituencies, we should defend their constituency interests. For example, the Dennis Kwok have departed from the Civic Party to support the endorsement of the new Chief Justice, while the rest of the Civic Party have voted abstain. I suppose we couldn't go overboard. Well, to be fair, or maybe slightly hold your horses, or something more moderate. Well, are you claiming that the council contains 2 comments? I hope they're not one of them. I'm saying about the truth and also believe in numbers. And of course, some claim they're high charges because there's a lot of work involved. Well, over 100 billion of charges. Sometimes we talk about performance instead of the actual work done. For the legal profession, well, we have passed this land titles bills. It's because too many of those don't want to lose their major source of income. But this bill had never get to the council. Well, the expense it's always the same title deeds. You can just register and overdone with. Well, let's be so mistaken that we don't have any common sense. Well, we're really short in time. Well, the bill itself is not complicated. However, well, the charges will ensure that the ARF will not be passed on to the scheme of the scheme members. Well, the oversight is shocking. Well, 5,000 or 5% or whatever charges. Well, for the average worker, if they charged more 10%, it might be a major sum. While 5,000 or whichever they're higher, they actually involve a very small amount. Well, for a lot of fund managers, it's really just a blip. So what penalties or deterrent to it? Or maybe you actually have to investigate or seek claims to cover the $5,000. This is toothless. When we talk about millions of dollars, billions of dollars, on the penalty to protect consumers, you talk about $5,000 fine. I don't know how does that make sense. Of course, this is just the first step. We definitely go forward with the MPF. Well, in terms of the supervision arrangement, we require the secretary to carefully pour over them. But I'll stress that the 5 major demands for the government to contributing for 6 months, and where we can check half the MPF contribution. Well, maybe it will the secretary or the CE's level. While reviewing the MPF, you can consider the one option in terms of ruling it out, which is completely abolish the MPF. So submit.
胡志偉議員
Mr. Uchiwai. We are dealing with the MPF Amendment Bill. The main objective of the bill is to empower the MPFA to establish a wholly owned subsidiary to build, own, and operate the eMPF platform. The platform seeks to provide a common integrated electronic platform to facilitate the standardization, streamlining, and automation of MPF scheme administration processes. Of the 30 million MPF administration transactions, 60% are paper-based. You can see that the high administrative costs are related to the paper-based processes. The target is to increase the digital take-up rate of the platform to 95% within 5 years. The problem is there's no timetable in transitioning from paper-based to electronic processes, and as such, the paper-based processes will continue to contribute to the high administration costs. So long as paper-based transactions still exist, the high administration costs could not be effectively reduced, and there's also no timetable or roadmap for the entire eMPF platform to illustrate how and when we can completely go paperless and electronic. For digital TV services in Hong Kong, we would tell the community that the service or the analog services would end in December 2019 and new TVs would have to be acquired, and the government might offer subsidies. A similar process is needed in order to fully convert to the electronic platform. Unfortunately, on the eMPF platform, we do not know whether the government is adopting a voluntary approach or whether deadlines have been given. I hope the Secretary would address this question. Or else the high administration costs could not be effectively reduced. The eMPF platform company can charge 0.03% of NAV as an annual registration fee. The government explained that the 0.03% in ARF could not be passed on to the users or scheme members. So the fee must be absorbed by the MPF trustees. The MPFA and government have indicated that they do not fully understand the administration costs of MPF trustees. We have been asking for market competition because the government cannot intervene in the internal operation of the trustees, and you do not possess the relevant data. If that's the case, how would you know whether they have refrained from passing on the costs to the MPF scheme members? You might say that with the electronic platform, competition between different trustees would lead to a drop in administration costs. like you said earlier today, with enough competition, the administration costs charged by trustees would continue to go down. Since the MPF system was introduced, that is, before the default investment strategy option was introduced, the pace of reduction of the administration costs has been slow, and this has been much criticized. With the 0.03% NAV as the annual registration fee, how would the government ensure that the cost is not passed on to scheme members? Is this something that can be resolved through legislation? Does the law empower you to obtain administration information or the fee structure or cost structure, and whether indeed they would not pass on the 0.03%? I hope the government can explain these. In terms of digitalization of the MPF platform, the objective of the eMPF platform is to digitalize the formats and contents of the current paper-based processes. But if you do not provide for specific policies and incentives to encourage employers to switch to the electronic platform, a lot of people might decide not to do anything, and that would jeopardize the benefits of the platform. Another important function of the eMPF platform is to complement the abolition of the offsetting arrangement and implementation of full portability. In abolishing the offsetting arrangement, employers must set up a designated savings account, and a special contribution must be made every month. In that case, if there is a plan to abolish MPF offsetting, you must ensure that all employers take up the eMPF platform before a certain deadline, or else they could not make the necessary monthly special contributions. Or you might still allow employers to make contributions via checks. If that's the case, the paper-based processes would simply not go away. Since you are planning to abolish MPF offsetting by mandating 1% contributions every month, and after this is done, can you implement full portability of MPF schemes? That is, employees can freely choose where they allocate their MPF balance. Even with this platform in place, a lot of work remains to be done. Given the current epidemic and political climate, would there be greater resistance from the sector? And the MPF system was established a long time ago, and the aggregate assets amount to $1 trillion. And MPF schemes that charge no more than 0.75% in management fees were mandated. But given the rising aggregate MPF value, in theory, the administration fees would not be directly proportional to the increase in aggregate value. the pace of increase of the aggregate account value should exceed that of the management fees. But the management fee is currently charged at a percentage of the account value. So with this electronic platform, should the management fees charged by trustees be kept at relatively stable levels? And with a rise in aggregate account value, the management fees should not rise proportionately. This is a variable cost, and the fluctuations should be relatively low. That would help the employees. But is this something you would pursue? The MPF system is one of the pillars of retirement. Some members indicated that the government always stresses market operation. But this is a mandatory provident fund. It shows that it is a legal requirement to make contributions, or else you would be in breach of the law unless you are not an employee. After this step, or the eMPF platform, well, our retirement protection framework should include three-party contributions from employees, employers, and the government. The government should be one of the contributing parties. This would show the society that the government is committed, and that would also satisfy the scheme members. MPF is a long-term savings scheme. Even slight drops in costs or administration fees would improve the eventual accrued benefits for employees. Even at a 5% return on investment, given the considering the current management fee levels, well, we would only end up with about 60% of the accrued benefits. So the lowering of administration fees would affect our eventual accrued benefits. So that is why we were much criticized when we talked about the MPF regime. Much of the accrued benefits have been eroded by market fluctuations as well as the management fees. I hope the government would deal with this seriously. You should not just focus on the eMPF platform. This platform is merely the first step to the grand plan. You must come up with a timeline in order to facilitate substantial reduction of administration fees. Eventually, the government should become one of the contributors to MPF. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Wuchiwai calls for quorum.
請議員返回座位，以
Will members please return to their seats so that we can count for the quorum?
《法定人數》
We have a quorum. Please be seated. Please be seated and be quiet. Helena Wong, do you wish to speak?